Hi, this is Kris Castro, and this is the Lead Upside Down podcast, where leaders are sharing how they are leading in non-traditional ways based on Jesus's leadership style. If you have any questions, go back to the trailer episode and that should answer them. But right now, grab your favorite beverage and settle in. If you have any questions or comments, especially if something resonates with you, feel free to go to my website, begin2shift.com, and set up a coffee and conversation meeting, and we can chat about it in more detail. All right, enjoy. Hey, everybody, it's Kris Castro from Shift Inc. and the Lead Upside Down podcast. I have today Charli Brown. She leads a wonderful ministry called the Rooted Kafe. She's also doing her doctoral work. I'm excited to have you here, Charli, and let me officially introduce you. Charli is a fearless female leader embarking on a journey that will stir your emotions, ignite inspiration, and drive you towards positive change. Charli is a captivating speaker and author, establishing profound connections with her audience and promising a transformative experience. With an unwavering dedication to empowering women, Charli fearlessly tackles challenging subjects with humor and relatable stories, making them accessible to all. Whether captivating audiences on stage, inspiring leaders to build strong teams, or leading women's conferences, Charli's mission is to foster healing and growth, encouraging women to embrace their innate potential and lead with authenticity. Don't get her started on her love of scriptures either, because she'll never stop talking. And I love that. Welcome, Charli.
Thank you. I love this celebration of all that he is. And I love who he is through me. I love hearing that.
Absolutely. So as always, I'm going to ask you two questions and then we're going to take a break and dive deeper. So the first question is, what does lead upside down mean to you, and how has leading upside down affected your life and work?
I love this question because I'm coming from the 80s. So leadership had a certain look up until just recently. And so for leading upside down to me is actually going back and leading the way Jesus led, right? Challenging conventional leadership norms, turning them on their heads, creating a more inclusive and empowering approach. I think it includes prioritizing collaboration over hierarchy, valuing diverse voices and perspectives, fostering this environment where everyone's contributions are acknowledged and appreciated instead of the because I said so leadership, right? It's been a positive for me because I see it as transformational leadership. If you're looking at the official terms and where I would categorize it is even in my doctoral work, it's this way that people can engage actually their faith and their ministry, and not just have one person at the helm, but rather this collective effort where basically every member plays a vital role. Oh, wait, this sounds like kingdom. And this approach for me has allowed me to have more innovation, more solutions, increased unity, and I think a deeper connection with a shared purpose.
Yeah, that's all great. I can't wait to talk to you a little bit more about your doctoral work. So before we take a break, let me ask you, for everybody that's listening that wants to lead upside better or has never led upside down and doesn't even know how to start, what are your suggestions?
Oh my goodness, that's a really great question too. My advice would be, first of all, you want to start to lead upside down by right in your sphere of influence. You know, the focus is on empowering others rather just than commanding authority. I think a lot of times we think, well, it's all on me. I mean, wrote the book on control, so I have to control it so it doesn't fall apart because it's going to make me look bad. And I'm afraid of everything falling under. But instead, embracing that idea that leadership is about creating this, again, environment where every voice is heard, respected, and valued. And this is going to be hard, Kris, but it's also creating a safe place of conflict. Patrick Lencioni wrote a really good book about this. It's a cute little allegory. It talks about, I think, the 5 dysfunctions of a leader. Great little teeny book. But I'm going to say he really encourages this, creating a place that's safe for conflict. And we're not leaving this idea because we don't agree with you. We're not going to kick you out because we don't agree with you. It's a safe place for all of us to collaborate and throw in a think tank. And then we may all walk away and not still choose your idea, but you feel heard.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, you can't put two people in a room for very long without somebody not agreeing about something. So
Exactly.
you have to learn to relate and you have to learn to get past all of that. I want to hear more about your doctoral work because I know it's focused on leadership. And because you lead upside down, in fact, before we even go there, why don't we backtrack a little bit? Because I
Okay.
think for this conversation to be set up correctly, they really need to learn a little bit more about you and how you've been leading upside down throughout your life and work. And most importantly, through the challenges that you face, because that's leading upside down as well.
Absolutely. I think it started out, I was in the military, and in there you're groomed from the beginning to be a leader at every level as you increase in rank and increase in wherever you're at in your position. You are taught to be a leader, and then you'll grow with that position. And then it came to, I'm always leading, whether I was in youth group leading, then I go into churches leading, going through seminary, becoming a pastor, and then working out not just as for a while there was interim pastoring, and then pastoring for a large congregation as a women's pastor specifically, and then back now to leading women in an international ministry. We have about 2,500 women now internationally that we are discipling and bringing programs to and leading, as well as the team around us is over 50 women that we're leading and inspiring upside down. We want to raise them up and send them out. And I think that's probably the best. And in all that, I became a mom and got married, and became a nurse, which, you're leading. That's a huge leadership position. And then now currently in a doctoral program for organizational leadership.
Yeah, and leading upside down often requires that you do things differently. It often requires that you make decisions that don't make sense to other people. Can you pull a story, either from your personal or professional life, doesn't matter which, that kind of showcases that leading upside down lifestyle that you've developed over the years?
Well, I think being a woman, a lot of everything I've done has been upside down. I was never wanted to be a nurse. I was in ministry. That's what I thought all I needed to do. And at the time, I felt like I knew that a divorce was imminent in my life, because of choices that he was making, that it was not going to be an atmosphere that was going to be conducive to a healthy growth of a marriage and a family. And so knowing that, we went back to school, and I think that's keeping that growth mindset. And that's going to be pivotal for me throughout my life as an upside down leader, is having a growth mindset and creating a culture of growth on my teams, encouraging them to grow. A lot of times as leaders, we're scared to do that. I had recently have members, this is kind of all part of the same story, but wherever I've gone, I've tried to encourage whoever's with me, whether it's the little CNA working with me at the hospital to an assistant working with me now. It's what can you do next? Where can you go to school? Encouraging them to jump into the next thing, grow, learn, and move on, as opposed to sometimes as leaders, if we have someone good, especially, we want to hold them tight and keep them where they were. So I think for me, the story is a little broad instead of specific. Wherever I've been, I found the people and encouraged them to go to the next level.
Yeah, that very much reminds me of my ministry leadership class that I took a couple of months ago. I mean, everything that he taught in that class was about legacy. You are always developing people to move forward because God is always growing them. You can't expect them to stay stuck in a place that you want them to be. You have to let them be where God wants them to be. So that
Yeah,
echoes that perfectly.
absolutely. The first question I ask when I'm going in to do training for ministry leaders, and I'm coming into an organization, or in or outside of ministry, the first question I ask is, everyone grab a piece of paper. Okay, get a pen. And I want you to write down the name of the person that's going to take your place. And most people are stuck. I mean, 90% of the people can't do it because they don't realize their job is to find the person to take their job.
Yeah, I get that completely. And that's upside down in itself because the world places people. And yes, there's promotional opportunities, but just like you said, if somebody above you doesn't want you to grow, or they value what you bring to the table more than they value where you need to be, that's something that you have to break free of. And sometimes you have to do it yourself. You just have to go look in someplace else, and you have to be willing to take risks.
Yep.
So in terms of risks, what risks have you taken in terms of leading upside down to get to where you knew Jesus wanted you?
There are so many. I'm going to just go current. There currently, I would say the first risk would have been stopping what I was doing and going into nursing school. That was a huge risk because it was a huge risk, and he made all the provision, and we could be leaders in the marketplace. Sometimes we feel like, oh, a leadership in ministry, I have to be a pastor, but maybe that's not what your role is, but you are a leader in the marketplace, which is ministry. It's huge. We're needed to be strategic in the marketplace as ministers and leaders, and leading well and showing them how to do it well. Oh, wait, just like Jesus did. And so recently I would say was 4 years ago when I quit nursing because it was comfortable. It's who I was. I had a master's in nursing. I was going to be a nurse educator. I was going to go to it was all planned out for me. And he's like, no, I need you to stop everything. And this is what I'm going to need you to do. And I was like, I don't understand even what you're calling me to. And it was creating an online virtual community / discipleship / well, I'm not going to say college. We'll just say school of learning. And I thought, well, what? And literally 4 months later, after I put it all together, developed it, we went into COVID and we went into lockdown. And so then it was like, oh, this is why. And now we ended up having a place for all these women where they didn't have community. They could come in, grow, learn, and we were able to develop leaders and build out of that. But it was scary and it was a risk and it didn't make any sense to me. And now I know if it's not scary, if it's not bigger than me, then it's probably not God.
Yeah, that's so very true. And back to your comment about feeling like you need to be in a ministry role to minister. That's one of the things that I learned a long time ago, that Jesus places you within an environment that he wants you to be a light and salt, right? And so you are a full-time minister wherever you are, no matter if you're just a mom raising kids or if you're the president of an organization. You are a full-time salt and light minister. You just have to figure out how to integrate your faith and work seamlessly without pushiness. And that's a whole thing too that we could go on a tangent on. But I want to talk about your doctoral program now, because I know it's focused on leadership. And I know that as you lead upside down, you're integrating what you know with what you're learning, because I know a doctoral program is bringing something completely new to the table that no one else has brought before. So in the process, and I can't remember, you have another year left before your thesis, your research paper?
I have about 7 months. Yeah, about
7 months. So you're far enough into it that you've learned some things, and you're far enough into it to be able to really connect the dots on what you knew before. Can you bring out some of those really great gems of leadership and upside down wisdom at this point in your doctoral journey?
This doctoral journey has changed my life. And I remember when I started, I'm going through Trevecca University. It's a Nazarene university out of Nashville, and it's an on-site program. But my classes are online. However, they do a phenomenal job of making us feel as if we're on campus. They told us during the introduction that it would change our lives. And I was like, okay, that's a big reach. It wasn't 6 weeks in and my life was already changing. And I realized how myopic I was seeing things. Even as a leader, we'll just use the Rooted Kafe as the example, just leading that organization, how in my organizational leadership doctorate program, it was showing me how to see things outside at a 30,000 foot level, as opposed to down I'm so busy working in the organization that I wasn't working on the organization, right? So that was one of the big things I saw. I also saw that I had to make sure that my energy matched my calling. And that included my physical health, self-care, even though we hear that a lot, and I'm not, I will preach that. How are you taking care of you? Because that cost is going to cost you now, or it's going to cost you a whole lot more later. So take the little pieces, whether it's time or money, and make those investments in you. As a leader, you have to do it. All great leaders spend time on self-care, exercise, eating well. You have to do it, not out of vanity, but out of energy conservation. And for me, my energy has to match my calling. I have to be careful when I'm traveling, when I'm going to speak, when I'm going to train, that I'm watching how I sleep, what I eat. That was a silly, it seems like, oh, out of a doctorate program, that's what you learned. The other thing I learned was interesting when I began looking at my doctoral dissertation. What was I going to choose on? I thought, oh, for sure, women in ministry leadership positions. And I'm going to talk about what inhibits us from jumping into that. What I found 2 months in was it was such a deep, dark, misogynistic pit of Black despair that I did not want to spend 2 years reading dissertation papers on these people that are just, it was so hate filled. I couldn't do it. And I told our program leader, I can't, the dean, I'm not going to spend 2 years of my life in this hole, because I don't feel like that's where God wants me. So instead I've changed. And now my dissertation is still on women in leadership, but it's on in not just church leadership, but leadership as a whole. And when I've learned that one of the things that keep women, in specifically women, and I'm going to say there could be men as well, because I think that the church in general has not done a great job for men who may not look like the traditional man. They may now classify them as maybe having a different gender, or not meeting certain norms. They're not embracing the fact that they're just created different, and they may lead differently. They have a different skill sets. So what's happening with women is we don't aspire to be leaders, is what I'm finding. And this is part of my dissertation and my study, is that we don't aspire to be leaders because we look at a leadership position and we think that there is a behavioral expectation, and which, by the way, is not usually upside down. There is a behavioral expectation, a very male behavior expectations. And for women, we're told, be nice, be sweet, don't be rude. And we feel like if we have to push a little past that, it makes us aggressive, and it pushes against our expectations and what we've been trained to do. So we will shrink back then and not aspire to that position, because there's a conflict. We have role conflicts, we have behavioral conflicts going on. So there's a lot of theories involved in all that. But I will say that that's one of the big things I've learned is, as women, let's embrace, and men, let's embrace that. I love this podcast for this reason. This is upside down. Let's realize, look into transformational leadership. Look what that looks like, because that's a beautiful, we can see there's so many great studies on productivity increase when you're looking at a whole picture. Like, women are holistic. We're like, I noticed that your arm looks funny when you're using that pull thing on that neck, if you're in a machinery company. Does that hurt? And he's like, yeah. Well, what if we move this? And then now his productivity went up. Why? Because that kind of leadership is different. You're looking at things different. So, I mean, that's a lot of words. Sorry.
No, it was great. I want to go back. It is, and I can see that. I want to go back to what you were talking about, just in terms of leadership being like culturally defined, and instead looking at leadership differently. Because what you said, I believe, can kind of be summed up to, leadership isn't about the how, it's really about the uniqueness of who you are in the leadership opportunity. Because we're all wired differently, which means that we're all going to approach leadership differently. There'll probably be threads of leadership qualities, but every one of us, I think, is going to have a unique spin on how that's done. And so, men or women in those roles, it really can't be traditional. It has to be uniquely them with some parameters and guidelines. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think we go back to this, what I'm learning in this specific section of my doctorate program, in the section that I'm in, the cohort, we're doing enterprise leadership. And specifically right now, and that's kind of an emphasis for me in my doctorate, is enterprise leadership. And it's looking from that 30,000 foot level. You might have an organization, or your family, you might have an organization that has legs. You have these verticals that and then what you realize is you're trying to find ways as a leader to bring everybody together. And like you said, it's going to look different. You know what else? As a great leader, you're looking down the pike to look for change, because you have to stay at 30,000 feet. You can't be stuck in the mud down in the bottom of everything. If you're looking for change, you have to be able to change and pivot based on what's coming. So not only do you may not look different, you may look different than someone else, you may not look the same next year, because you have to have that growth mentality where you're ready to pivot and change with what's coming next.
Yeah. That reminds me of a book that I'm reading for seminary right now, which is about collectivism versus individualism. And it's all about the mindset about the leader having to take care of the entire family. Like, and that means multiple people, not just core family, the entire tribe, clan type thing. And really having to be us mindseted rather than me mindseted about everything. So the change and the looking ahead, it's all about protection, safety, and movement for the family, whatever that looks like in terms of leadership too.
Yes. Yeah. And that's like we do with the body of Christ, right? That's how we are collectively looking at. And it's not thinking of one position more important than another.
Yeah, because they all contribute. Absolutely. So what I want you to do right now is just kind of dig in and share a little bit more about you leading Upside Down in both the Rooted Cafe, which I've loved and I've been part of for a while. And it's been fun to watch the organization transition since I think I got involved in it in 2021, and how things have gotten different, better, whatever you want to say about it, because of that lead upside down mindset.
Well, when I love that you've been with us for a while, so you'll watch her face. If you're watching the video, you'll see the If you've watched for a while, you've noticed that in the very beginning, especially, we were building this plane while it was taking off. So you may find yourself in that situation, whether it's God's called your family to a new thing, or he's called your business or called you, and you have no idea what you're doing. And you're literally just building the plane as it's taking off. And then once the plane got into the air, now we're at the place now where we haven't arrived. And I think that our missions, we may land for a minute and then he sends us to another thing. But what we're noticed is we're like, these chairs would look much better if we move this to this. Or it could even be that, you know what, we've noticed that this cargo is a little heavy for this flight. We'll get better gas mileage if we cut these things out and we release this. You start realizing the improvements, the adjustments that you have to make so that your plane's or business or family is going to actually hum. It's going to align with what it's called to do. And sometimes we say yes to a lot of things that we should not. It's not our best yes. And we have to do the pruning and get rid of cargo so the plane flies a little better and gets better gas mileage. And it's been constant evaluation, doing it all the wrong ways. I mean, I can just say I'm so sorry to those who have been with us that maybe worked for us and no longer do. I love you. Please love us again. There have been ways that I didn't do things well. I will just tell you, secret back end is I'm an only child. So I have a lot of conversations with myself that I think came out of my mouth, but don't. And then I'm also not a micromanager. So if you tell me you know how to do it, I'm like, okay, I won't double check you. But then what happens later, I come down and it's a hot mess. And then I'm going to be, the story is my daughter, when she was little, I would tell her, you get your room cleaned and it looked clean. It looked clean, looked clean. Till one day I walk by and I noticed a sock under the bed. I'm like, I better put that in the laundry. When I pull it, all the rest of the clothes came out from underneath the bed. Well, now what's going to happen, and this is the same thing that's happened in business with employees, with team members, is I'm like, what? And you find one thing and now everything comes out. I open the closet, I pull, and then it's like, clean this all up or you're out. So there's the thing you can't do. There's got to be a balance between the micromanagement and the macro management, because we can't be both. I mean, my book I wrote, It's Not My Weed to Pull, is all about being a control freak. So then what happens is I feel like I went to the extreme other side, and then I'm like, oh, it's all good. It's all good. And then I realized my plane is full of crazy stuff and everybody's picking up souvenirs along the way. And we had to just make some big adjustments. And also, if my plane in the organization, I'm using the plane analogy, if your plane can't fly unless you're there flying it, then you need to reevaluate. For me, I found that if I slowed back on the Rooted Cafe for health reasons or other interests, God sending me, I realized it's slowed down too. then I hadn't built it well. I didn't organize my team well. And that's that part of you constantly adjusting and evolving and being willing to say, I don't know how to do this. I just don't know how to do this. We need to find someone who knows how to do this.
Yeah, I think when you lead upside down, it's a real big combination of faith, trust, risk, obedience, and willingness to be transparently unsure.
Yeah.
And all of that together is a great leader. I know it doesn't sound like it from the world's point of view, but in the kingdom, that is the best place that you can be. Because, like you said, you're building things as the plane is going up, and you're basically telling the team that you're with, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. We're going to make the best decision possible, trust Jesus with the outcome, and we're going to adjust as we need to along the way.
Right. And for in this particular situation, I had a little moment with him, and he showed me it's not my job to keep this alive. That's his job. So he's just going to show me how to lead it, but I didn't have to keep the breath flowing through it. And I was putting so much, it would wear me out feeling I was pouring so much life, and it wasn't my job to do that. That's his.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that leaders often take responsibility for that they shouldn't. Because if Jesus is birthing it in you, Jesus is responsible for maturing it. And all your job is day by day to care for the baby that he gave you. And like in real life, God knows when things are going to die. God knows when things are going to expand. And you just have to trust him with all of that timing and be okay with whatever he does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And being a leader, the final thing I think in this area for me is that has been a big realization. I think I've known this, but it was in this season, it seems to have hit home, and I've embraced it, is that eagles fly alone. It's lonely being a leader. I tell a lot of leaders that I mentor in nonprofits, ministry related and non-ministry related, is that get out of the chicken coop. That's a word. If I'm ever coaching you, you're going to hear me say, get out of the chicken coop, because a lot of times we'll get down in the chicken coop and we are with all the squawking and the complaining and all the stuff going on. And what happens is you get stuck in all the stuff that's in a chicken coop. Your wings are too big. They don't fit in the coop. That's not where you belong. You belong up above things, and you're doing hard stuff, and you're up in there, and you don't belong in the chicken coop. I'm not saying that those in the chicken coop are bad. It's just not where you're called to. And it can be lonely because you want to be part of all that, but they need you to not be in the chicken coop, because your wings can be intimidating, and your beak and your talons, those can be intimidating when you're spending too much time down in the chicken coop.
Before we end, can you share a story about leading upside down in the midst of conflict? Because I think that's important for others to really learn what that looks like in terms of the regular way that people might do it versus the kingdom way that Jesus calls us to do it.
I'm big on this. So thank you for asking this question. I'm really big on having organizations and homes, whatever size your organization is, embracing conflict. And I know that is like so upside down, but you have to embrace the almost encourage the conflict. And if you've created an environment, so if we've created an environment where everyone gets to know each other, and I know, Kris, that this is where you grew up. I know that you were from a single parent home, and I knew that maybe you spent time in foster care, or I know your story because we've done exercises as a team to know each other, and we're not going to use that as a weapon against anyone. But what I know in the middle of conflict, meaning when we're not agreeing on this, I'm not going to say something that might trigger what I already know could be an abandonment issue with you, because I already know you well enough to know. And I just made that all up, by the way. I know you, or I know whoever, I know them enough that I have now respect, because now we're part of a team. If you've built a team of trust, you can have conflict. It can be inspiring, and it can bring you to the next level. It's iron sharpening iron. And it's respectful, and it's productive. And I'm excited about conflict because it brings about amazing change. And we can look through scripturally what wasn't conflict, what didn't take it took conflict to take the children from Egypt to get out of Egypt, right? It took conflict to get Joseph even into Egypt. It took conflict to get Jacob to get to the, I mean, if we can go through every story and, don't get us started on Moses, because he's like, hello, I can give you a million leadership stories just on him. But all through that, there's conflict. And then let's look at Jesus. Look at the conflict that happened here and what was used, because we have to trust. We have to trust as believers. If you're listening and you're a believer, we have to trust Romans 8:28. It is all going to work for our good. It's all going to work for our good. So if we sit in it and say, okay, so what I heard you say is, and it came out trash. You just dumped this. Can you tell me more about what you feel about this? And that's, every great leader doesn't have the answers. They have more questions. So I think in conflict, the conflict comes in, and a great leader is going to be able to sit there and ask more questions so that a collaborative now can come up with the solutions in respect and honoring each other. And everyone feels heard and everyone feels like they're part of the solution, even if their answer wasn't accepted.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot about in the Aleph Bet course when Brenda talks about the bet and how Bet is the house, the place of safety where you grow up in and you learn to become who you are and you develop your identity in Jesus.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a thing, because if you are like, if your organization is the bait, if it's the house, what's the identity that it's your job as the organizational leader, male or female, you're the matriarch or patriarch of this organization. Have you even thought about what's the culture that I'm building so that when people are risen up in this, we all have a culture of, we handle conflict as a team. We embrace conflict. It's not a bad word. We embrace collaboration. We embrace everyone's ideas. They might be crazy, but they might remind you, we always used to call it the brainstorming, but it might remind you of something that's actually going to be the solution to this problem.
Yeah. Well, before we close out, I guess I'm just going to open the floor and let you kind of end the way you want to end in terms of how you want to close out this conversation.
Well, that's loaded. Okay. Something that was on my heart, and I wrote it big and bold on my notes, was one of the things was asking questions, because that was really big for me. But the second thing was something that is incredibly upside down. It's not going to make sense to you. Pray about it, especially if you're over a certain age. This is going to be really hard for you to hear. Have I built this up enough? I want you to find a younger mentor. As a leader, you need to have two mentors, someone who's older than you, who's doesn't necessarily mean chronologically, but someone who's been where you haven't been, who challenges you, because that's where you should be in new rooms. If you're the smartest person in the room, you need to get some new rooms. You need to get into the rooms where you feel silly and you're like, I don't know anything. That's where you should be. That's growth. But I want you to find your second mentor. I want you to pray and look for a younger mentor, someone who's younger than you, who has fresh ideas, and they're seeing it's not just so that you're relevant to what's happening, because we are now in a spot where we are leading multiple generations. See if I can say that 3 times. We're leading multiple generations. It looks different than it really has ever looked, because before, when we led generationally from, we'll say 80s and 90s, we're back to that because I said so. And from there down, you showed up to work and it didn't matter what generation you were. These are the expectations and you got it done. It doesn't look like that anymore. And if you're fighting that, you're going to lose, and you're just going to be exhausted and frustrated. So I want to encourage you to realize you have multiple generations with multiple mindsets, and you may not understand it, but that's part of the collaborative. Is if you find someone who's a younger mentor for you, and I do have someone she's a younger mentor, and man, she challenges me. She uses language, not like bad language, but vocabulary that I've never heard, or I haven't heard it used in that way. And that it makes me see things from a different angle. And I'm so excited about it. I mean, Kris, my life is on fire right now. And one of the things is because I have brought on a younger mentor and I have an older mentor. And it's really great if you can find someone who doesn't look like you. Find someone who doesn't look like you, because you're going to want input from all over, and not someone that you know really well, who's not in the middle of all your team or whatever. It needs to be someone outside who you can say, oh, I'm a mess, and they can call you out. Give them permission to call you out. That's really been a huge thing for me. Again, it's bringing that diversity, because we hear that word, it's overused, I think, a lot. Maybe we heard it, we've been beaten to death with it. Just really push yourself out of your comfort zone in that area. And then leading by example. Do what I do, not what I say. It's going to be different for some of you. You model the behaviors that you're looking for, model the behaviors that you want committed in your culture. If you're telling them, I want to see this and this happening, they should have already watched you doing it. And even if it feels awkward that you're doing it intentionally so they see you, it's okay, because they need to see you. More's caught than taught, right? So we want to do that. And then I'll go back to looking for change. Keep looking for change as it's coming and being able to adapt to the change. You got to be flexible, adaptable, face the change without fear. Transformational leadership is not rigid. It is embracing change, guiding your team through the transitions. You're the captain of the ship. So you're the one who's saying, oh, wait, there's an iceberg we need to reroute. And not everyone's freaking out. Why are we going the wrong direction? Because they trust you, because you've brought everybody along, and you didn't just make this decision and say, because I said so. And you've brought this community along with you. Then once you've built that, you now can give back, and you can encourage your team to engage in the community, social responsibility activities, participating in volunteer work together, charitable events together. I mean, I love doing like the American Cancer Society with groups that I did, and everyone saw the bigger picture. They saw us working as a team outside. You had fun stories, so that when you do get around that conflict table, you have the foundational depths of that one time when you did the walkathon and so wore that pink shirt and it was so funny and it ripped. You have these fun stories to go to the table with. And last, it's just not about you. I mean, it's not about you. How are you leading about everyone else?
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at Jesus, he was with the disciples for 3 years, and they started out as rough fishermen and ended up as world changers. And there was a lot of conflict, misunderstanding, and seriously moments like along the way. And that's what it is to be a leader, is to remember that people are always in process. And you have to not only toe the line in terms of holding them accountable, but there has to be grace, mercy, excuse me, accountability, and legacy mindedness along the way.
I love legacy mindedness. Yeah. This is a generational work. This isn't just about us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Charli, for being my guest. For those of you that want to connect with Charli, I'll put all of her information in the show notes. You can follow Charli on Facebook. She's part of the Rooted Kafe. She founded it. If you guys are interested in about that, I'll put that in there as well. And Charli, thank you again for being a wonderful lead upside down leader. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the privilege of sharing with your audience, and thank you all.
Thanks. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for hanging out and enjoying the Lead Upside Down podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. And remember, wherever you are, you can lead upside down too, just like Jesus did. Feel free to reach out to me if you want more information, or if you think I can serve you in some way. Just go to my website, begin2shift.com, and click on the coffee and conversation icon and set that meeting up. Have a fantastic rest of your day.